That'd be better.
Yeah, that'll have to do.
Hey, I got coffee. Boom. Stole your cup.
There you go. Did you steal it from work?
That's it. I stole it from the office. I actually really like it.
That's where the
cup.
other gold one went.
What do you mean?
There's another
You
gold
took it.
cup. No.
No. You took that one.
You took it.
100%. I don't have that. I like that one, but I haven't been able to find it. Oh, man. Hey, I was wondering, Nello.
Yes, welcome, Brian, by the way.
Welcome. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Two Peas and a Pod.
Yeah, Brian doesn't care if you're here. He doesn't say hello. He just wants to do it. Get on with it. Ask his question.
I'm task focused.
Is that task focused?
That's it. Got to get the Two Peas and a Pod out there for our 15 listeners.
Grown.
Hey, here's my question.
It's grown by 10. Yes.
Yeah. We're doing Exodus, and I was wondering because someone wanted to watch The Prince of Egypt. You know, as a congregation, watch it together. But I was just wondering, do you actually know? Do you know if there's any other Exodus movies out there other than that one?
Well, I'm not a great fan of the kind of biblical movies because they just get them so wrong.
Yeah.
But is Ben-Hur's about Moses, isn't it?
Is it?
Yeah, I think Ben-Hur. About Moses. Maybe we should do a quick internet search. Hey, guys at home, in the comment section, right?
Yeah.
All movies about Moses or the Exodus, list them in the comment section.
Yeah.
And the most inventive, is that the word I'm looking for? Most obscure. Sure. The most obscure movie gets a prize.
Oh, awesome. What's the prize, Nello? What are you?
I don't know.
What are you delivering?
What am I delivering? if you're within the 5 kilometer radius, I'll deliver you something.
All right. No, that's good. No Wikipediaing as well.
No. That's
I've actually done that. Sorry to let you know.
You have?
First of all, yeah, I Wikipedia'd it. I think So
then you're disqualified. You're
disqualified.
You're disqualified from entering, right? Right. Most obscure or any movie reference, Exodus, Moses, hit us up in the comment section.
Hit us up.
We'd love to hear. Okay. And if you're listening on Spotify, bad luck.
You're too late.
We don't care.
All right. Hey, now let's get to some of the questions, I reckon.
Yes.
So we unfortunately we skipped last week's podcast.
No, so Exodus 1 and 2 today.
Yeah, Exodus 1 and 2.
Whatever questions we have left over or any that you can think of from your Old Testament class that you never got to ask.
My first question that I had, I think you've actually answered it, but this was let's just give it again.
Let's do it again.
Let's give it again. Let's go again. What is a Hebrew? And is it the same as an Israelite?
Good question, Brian. Thanks very much for that, mate. Yeah, we did talk about it a little bit last week. So the term Hebrew is first used in reference to Abraham as a noun. And it seems to me, we're not exactly sure, but it seems to me one of the meanings for the word is crossed over. And so it references the fact that God called Abraham out of his land, of Ur, to the promised land, and he crosses over a river to get there. And so the Hebrews are descendants of the one who crossed over. And it tends to be used by other nations referring to the Hebrews. You're the descendants of the crossed over, the person who crossed over. Okay. And so you'll almost exclusively find it, say, in Exodus, it's the term that the Egyptians use for the Israelites or for the Hebrews, which is interesting when Moses uses it that way. Right? It's kind of reflecting his Egyptian upbringing. Okay. Israelite, on the other hand, another name for the same group of people, references the fact that you've got Abraham, he has a number of children. One of the children is Jacob. He changes his name, or actually his name is changed after wrestling with God or an angel of the Lord, right, to Israel. And his descendants, 12 of them or whatever, are the children.
It's listed in chapter 1. chapter 1,
are
verse
the
2 and 3.
children of Israel, or sometimes they're called the sons of Jacob, right? But they're the children of Israel. They're Israelites, right? So the Israelites. So they're referencing that they're descendants of Jacob, right? That tends to be the phrase that is used internally. So when the Israelites refer to themselves, right? Jews, last one, right? So you'll know that the nation of Israel under, just after Solomon, splits into two kingdoms. You have a southern kingdom and a northern kingdom, right?
That's with Jeroboam and
Rehoboam.
After the civil war,
And the northern kingdom, and it's 10 tribes that become the northern kingdom. The northern kingdom rather cheekily refers to themselves as Israel. So they're kind of like saying, we're the real Israelites, even though we're the ones rebelling against King David or the lineage of David. And then the southern kingdom is referred to as the kingdom of Judah. And there are two tribes that are made up in the southern kingdom, Judah and Benjamin, right? But Judah's the royal tribe, okay? It's the kingly tribe.
The kingly tribe as in the tribe that Jesus comes from.
Well, it's the tribe that kings come from, right? Right. And so they take the name, the kingdom of Judah. So sometimes during the prophets, depending which prophet you're reading, it can refer to Israel and it's referring to the whole nation, or it's referring to Israel, the northern kingdom. Okay, or it'll refer to Israel and Judah together, talking about the whole kingdom.
Right. So
when the northern kingdom gets obliterated, which it does, it gets intermingled. I think it's under the Assyrians. They get intermingled and they kind of don't really exist anymore. There's some. The term to refer to the people that are left, which is the tribe of Judah and Benjamin and any northern people that come back, becomes the Jews. And it's referencing people from the tribe of Judah, but it becomes a catch-all phrase for anyone who's left, right? And so then it just becomes a catch-all phrase for the people of God. The Old Testament people of God, right? The Jews. So Hebrew, Israelites, Jews. History lesson. There you go. Sorry to bore everyone at home.
That's really interesting. Hey guys, we want you to get into history, biblical history as well. I think it's fascinating. It's really, really good. Thanks for that, Nello. So
that's right, mate.
Why don't we move to the next question?
Yes, sir.
Righty. So this one's about kings. If God is the king of the nation of Israel, right?
Yes.
Why does he reference in Genesis 35 that kings will come from the nation of Israel? And then I guess the next part of that is, are kings inherently bad?
Yeah. So what you find all through Genesis is statements of what's going to happen in the future. So, for example, you have God speaking to Abraham, letting him know that his descendants are going to end up in Egypt, right? Years before it happens. So here, God is speaking to Jacob, letting him know that the reality is that kings are going to come from his lineage, okay? He's not endorsing kingship, he's actually stating a fact.
And you kind of don't hear how Jacob, or Israel responds to that.
No.
He's like, no, you're God. Surely we think you're God. Why would you be kings?
And in one sense, kingship is not a bad thing in and of itself because God is their king, right? So kingship in and of itself is not a bad thing, right? The problem with what Israel does under Samuel, right, in the time of the judges, is they want a king like the other nations. So they want to be like the other nations. Israel always had a king. It was God, right? So when they want to be like the other nations, they're wanting to throw God off as their king and have a human king, right? So, and it's interesting. I mean, God doesn't say at that point kingship is bad, right? He says it's Samuel that gets annoyed about the concept because he thinks he should be king, right? And God says, in essence to Samuel, what right do you have to be upset? Right?
Is that right? So
they're throwing me off. They're throwing me off as king, not you. So the concept of kingship is not inherently bad because God is their king. It's the fact that they choose to have someone other than God as their king. And what's happening and all I think is happening in Genesis 35:11 is that God is saying to Jacob that he's going to be a father of a group of people which is going to produce kings.
Yeah, human kings.
Yes.
So could it be said then that had they not said or thought, we want another king like the other nations, we want a human king, perhaps to rule over us, but not like the other nations. Is that okay? Is that what is that a right way of thinking about it? I'm just pushing it a little bit. Because I wanted to understand. Because Genesis 35 is saying there will be kings that come from.
Yeah, it's a prophetic word, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, that's right. And there's no.
This is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
There's no moral judgment on that. There's no that's right or that's wrong.
No.
It's just this is what.
It's just what's going to happen. Yeah.
But 1 Samuel 8, when Israel demands for a king, it's God saying, "I am your king."
Yeah.
And it's wrong what you're doing because you want kings like other nations.
Yes, that's right.
That's the wrong.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. So, like I said before, Genesis often just has statements in it, prophetic words about what's going to happen to Israel, but it doesn't necessarily make those statements with any sense of judgment about them. Right? Mm-hmm. You're going to end up, you're going to end up in Egypt. You're going to end up as slaves. It just kind of makes these statements, right? And so here in Genesis 35, God is just saying, I am the God Almighty, be fruitful, be multiply, a nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall come from your own body. Right? That's just what's going to happen. Without any kind of statement one way or the other. God was always their king, and they should never have sought a human king over them. And I mean, the other thing is, Jacob himself gives line to many nations, not just the Israelites.
Yeah.
Right? The Israelites are but one nation that comes from Jacob. Right? There are lots of other nations that come from Jacob as well, half brothers and children from concubines and whatnot.
The question about this idea of the fine child. I think I was just looking at my translation, the Christian Standard Bible translation.
The Christian Standard Bible.
That's it. Verse 2, right? I don't know where I got this one. There it is.
The Christian Standard Bible.
Have you read this one? What do you think?
Wow. Yeah, go for it. Don't know. Never heard of it.
Oh, the question is, wouldn't a fine child just mean a healthy child?
Yeah.
How do you pick up that it means something good will happen to him? Is it in the Hebrew, perhaps? So, kind of, the question's trying to dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah, for sure.
Your explanation of fine child. My reading in Exodus 2:2 says the woman who had Moses, so who became pregnant, gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was beautiful, that was the word.
Yeah.
She hid him for 3 months. So you
said beautiful is a horrible translation.
Gotcha. There you go.
All right.
Hey,
so
fine child.
So literally the Hebrew.
All healthy. He says all healthy.
Yeah. So literally the Hebrew is right, and she gave birth to a son. Yeah. And he was good.
Right.
Right. So that's, if you kind of, it's not a word for word, but a literal translation of the Hebrew is she gave birth to a son and he was good.
Right.
Now, what does that sound like?
Creation story?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Sure.
And so there's a whole heap of connections back to Genesis in this passage. Right. So the connection of Noah, water, saved through reed, saved through water. So there are all these connections all the way in Exodus chapter 1 and 2 back to Genesis. So
right. So can I just ask then?
Yes.
Therefore, if you're reading the Hebrew, you would see that word good. I think it's 12, right?
Yep.
And then that should make you think, because you're reading the original.
Hello.
Oh, that goes back to Genesis.
It sounds a bit like.
Right.
So often with these connections, you go, where have I heard that before? So we did that, for example, in Exodus chapter 1, right? Be fruitful and multiply, be fruitful and multiply. Where have I heard that before?
Genesis.
Right?
Yeah.
And so remember, the author is trying to actually take you back and say these people, so in Exodus chapter 1, these people are people of promise, right? These people are the people of the Creator, the children of Abraham, right? Here in Exodus chapter 2, you've got this word for a child, and I mean, not only is the girl not referenced as being fine, right, but he's clearly out of these Levite couples' children, the one that's been singled out. Why are we told, and he was good? Now, it could be that we're just being told he's healthy. But that would seem to be in the story, in the narrative, because remember, it's not just a biography, it's a theological biography. The author is trying to teach you something for a purpose. It would be a weird statement just to throw in there, right? And less still beautiful. You had the reference beautiful. I mean, his looks have got nothing to do with it, right? So when you look through the story and you keep reading, what you end up seeing is that Moses becomes this rescuing type figure, right? So as you read so if you were to read it and go, and he was good, right? The birth of this child, he was good. Good in what sense? Okay, well, let's keep reading, right? So you hold this thought in your mind, let's keep reading. And as you see, he keeps rising up as this person that even though he's been raised an Egyptian, he remembers his people, he sees their oppression, and he wants to act, right? And you can't help but read the passage and go, is this what the author meant when he was saying he's good? Right? He's going to see his people and respond to their oppression. He's going to see his people and act. And then he does it again when the two Hebrews are fighting. He does it again when the shepherd women are under danger. There is something about this man that sees the need of the oppressed and wants to act. And does what is good, right? And he becomes, a reflection of what God will do. In fact, what God will do through him. So the writer is trying to get you in Exodus chapter 2 to go, if Moses can see the need of his people and act, and that is the good for which he was created or saved, will God do it? And then, of course, I don't want to give away Exodus chapter 3. That's right. But in Exodus chapter 3, that's exactly what you see happening. And in the beginning of the chapter, God, in essence, goes, I saw, I heard, I acted, here's Moses. He's the rescuer.
It sets you up, it builds you up to kind of make you think, if this is what this man does, what's God going to do? And then kind of leads on to chapter 3, which we'll find out this week. That's really helpful. Were the Israelites not crying out to God before verse 23? So verse 23. Let me read it. Chapter 2, verse 23 says, now this is the end of chapter 2. Almost. After a long time, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned because of their difficult labor, and they cried out, and their cry for help because of the difficult labor ascended to God. God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the Israelites, and God knew. So the question again, were the Israelites not crying out to God before verse 23?
So let's do two things, right? One, of course they were crying out, right? They're being oppressed, they're being flogged. Wow, what's going on, right? So in one sense, of course they are. But if you're a close reader of the text, it doesn't actually tell us that anywhere. So all through chapter 1, we're not being told that the Israelites cry out to God. I mean, I'm sure they were, right? But we're not being told. We're simply being told the more they're oppressed, the more they multiplied. Right? So we're actually not hearing the Israelites' response to being oppressed. So in one sense, what's happening as a piece of literature, as a piece of writing, okay? In chapter 1, we're being introduced to the fact that there's this battle between Pharaoh and the king of the Israelites, God. And Pharaoh ultimately is going to lose no matter what he does, and that God is in the business of keeping his promises to make them a mighty nation. Then in chapter 2, it's kind of an introduction part 2. We're getting introduced to Moses, and we're seeing something of his character as a rescuing character. But the other thing we're being introduced to is the nation of Israel and what they're like. And we only really hear about them right at the end, where they cry out. But the author, again, is setting us up for this last statement. And so all through chapter 2, you're getting these stories of people crying out in anguish or people in distress. And that sets us up for, right at the end, Israel cries out. And how does the princess and the other people in the story, the other rescuers in the story, respond when they hear crying out? It's setting us up for how is God going to respond. Now, you could argue what a waste of ink. And why couldn't you have put that right at the beginning? Well, I suppose the author could have done that. But it's a wonderful piece of literature where by telling a story, unlike writing a letter or an epistle like Romans, he's trying to get us to see both the character of the people of God, but more importantly, the character of God who listens to when people cry out. So it's a long way of saying, of course, the Israelites were crying out prior to verse 23, 24. There's not a chronology, right? But the author is emphasizing it in verses 23 to 24 because he set up these previous stories, and the previous stories are kind of almost priming you to respond in a certain way. You hear this crying out and you're almost conditioned to respond. There's got to be a rescuer.
Yeah, right? That's right.
And now when you jump into chapter 3, you hear language of he heard, he saw, he knew, he acted. But how is he going to act is the big question. So at the end of chapter 2, we're being primed for the fact that we know God is going to act because all the human agents in the story have acted when they've heard crying out. In chapter 3, how is he going to act? What is he going to do? How is he going to rescue them? And how does Moses fit into that?
And he really sets it up for chapter 3. Hey, and I'm really looking forward to what's going to happen then.
And I think we were talking in our staff meeting on yesterday that one of the things that stands out when we read Exodus 1 and 2 in the Old Testament, the Bible as a whole, but the Old Testament stories in particular, is that we're not particularly good readers. I mean, we can read the words on the page, but we're often not good at seeing how the author is constructing their story. But if that had been put on film and we were watching it on YouTube or something like that, you would get it straight away. Yeah. So we've become much more visual.
How do you think, I guess as a subsequent to that question, is how can we get better at reading narrative and stories, do you reckon? Maybe just a couple of things.
So I think, one, there's always a story arc in a narrative, right?
Like any good movie as well.
Like any good movie, there's always a kind of tension, right? There's usually something that gives rise to a tension in the story. Then there's usually a couple of examples of what that tension would be like. And then there's a resolution. Where's the hero? Right. And then there's a falling tension, and then there's peace. Right. So if you kind of remember that story arc a little bit as you're reading a narrative, then you kind of go, where are we? And so in Genesis chapter 2, right, the story arc is there's this tension. The Israelite boys are going to get killed, right? How can God keep his promise to Abraham if the boys are being killed, right? And then you have these 3 or 4 stories that seem unrelated to that. So, you know, the writer has gone, the Israelite boys are going to get killed. Pause, right? And then you get the princess and you see how she acts. And then you kind of go, okay, there are all these other stories that seem unconnected to that. Well, actually, you're getting told a little bit about the hero of the story, Moses, and what he's like.
Yeah.
And the real question at the end of the story is, what's going to happen to the people of God? So you're getting this kind of story arc, and you're being told right at the tip of the story, the people cry out.
Yeah. It's reaching this climax. What's going to happen?
What's going to happen? What's going to happen? And we're told God knows, but how's he going to get them out?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's hinging now in chapter 3 with how's God going to do that?
Yeah, excellent.
So just being really careful readers of the story and not just going, oh, yeah, this happens. Why is it happening? Why is it there?
Asking the question of why.
Asking the question, why is the author put it there?
Yeah. All right. That was really cool. That's helpful.
You're right.
So
Old Testament 101.
Old Testament 101. I'm sure if you wanted to know a little bit about how stories work, I think I've seen something from Nello. So if you want some resources, Nello can shoot some.
A really good book.
Resources.
A really good book is by a guy called, a little bit hard to read, but it's worth getting your head around. He Gave Us Stories is the title of the book. He Gave Us Stories by Richard Pratt, Pratte. He's the Old Testament professor he's a professor of Old Testament studies at Orlando Theological College, part of Reformed Theological Seminary. He Gave Us Stories by Richard Pratt, and he's written another book called He Gave Us Prophets. He Gave Us Prophets as well. So both those books would be good books.
I'll raid your library and just take them. All right. So everyone, thanks for joining us on the 2 Ps in a Pod this week.
Yeah, I know we're back in our separate offices over Zoom, right? So
that's right.
He's praying that we will be back soon. If you have questions about Exodus 1, 2, 3 in the coming weeks, and you don't want to put them on Slido, but you do want to hit us up, then please put them in the comments section on the YouTube page. And we will try and answer them, or email Brian and I. We're happy to do that, or put them up in our Facebook community page, EPC Facebook community page. People who are listening overseas, I'm sorry about that. You can't join our Facebook community page, but that's okay.
Well, I hope this podcast was helpful for you. This week we're looking at chapter 3 to 4, verse 17. So have a read of God's
absolutely.
Word
It'd be a good read
before Sunday. We hope it will be helpful for you.
Yeah.